So, Mike, how far would you drag me up a mountain before deciding to eat me?
Couple days. We're doing season 5, episode 9, The Ascent.
That was terrible. Oh my god. We get worse. What's up, everybody? Oh, wow. Folks, if you ever wondered, how bad does it have to be in the first 30 seconds for them to start over? Apparently worse than that, which is really saying something. Welcome to Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. Today we are talking about Season 5, Episode 9, The Ascent. And we had a long discussion about the difference between ascent, as in to climb, and ascent, which means to agree.
That would make them homonyms, correct? Sound the same, spelled differently, different meanings.
Yes.
Homophones.
Yes. Although
I
think ascent. I don't know if they're the same emphasis, but anyway, point is, we are going to talk about this great episode. I'm excited to do it. We have something exciting coming up next week, but only for our patrons, because as we're swamped with Mike doing his show, we're going to do something super awesome. We're going to talk about it in the Patreon section of the show. But before we do that, we have to talk about last week's episode, Things Past. And those same patrons I mentioned get to have their comments, or some of their comments, read on air by me. Do we normally record in the morning? And right now, because of Mike's schedule, we're recording at like almost 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and my brain is fried.
See, some would think you'd be warmed up by now.
No, it's quite the opposite. I am a morning person. I am like 10 a.m. is right where my brain is going. And by now, I'm like, I don't know if I'm sundowning, but it's something like that. So anyway, if you want me to read your comments, become a patron or leave a super thanks down below. So here is what you had to say.
Or
Jason
a portion
Mose,
thereof.
Well, we're going to get into it, because we got a lot of feedback, both about last week's episode, but also about ours production ends. So here we go. Jason Moe says, hey guys, not much to say about this very average Deep Space Nine episode other than to give it a very average 75 stem bolts. Some unsolicited feedback, the best kind, that you can totally feel free to disregard.
Even better.
I think it's very cool.
The best kind.
Yeah, there we go.
Unsolicited feedback that you don't mind if I disregard? That's my preferred feedback.
Perfect. It's very cool that you're including patron comments about the prior week's episode in these videos. At first, I thought you were going to just include excerpts from each patron comment, but lately it seems Keith is reading the patrons' comments in their entirety, or most of their entirety. I know there are timestamps so viewers can skip past these if desired, but I'm more concerned for your sakes as the hosts, that each week you are spending nearly 30 minutes reading patron comments, so by the time you're ready to start the actual analysis and review of the new episode, all that time spent on comments might make you want to rush a bit of the analysis of the new episode. Just my 2 cents, but I'd be totally fine if you just. So, see what I did there? Yeah.
Now, first I want to make it clear to Jason, because he might not know how the algorithm works. We spend 1 minute per dollar of patron money that we receive on the comments.
Oh, is that what we do? Yeah, well, and here's the thing, Jason, you are 100% right, and I think, although to be fair, I don't know how much analysis we're skipping in our hour and 40-minute episodes, but I think you're 100% right, and I'm going to sort of try to split the difference and not spend a half hour on all of this every week. And but here's the thing: what you think is me being generous and reading the whole comments is really me being lazy and not editing ahead of time. So that is literally I'm being lazy about prep time and paying for it on the air. Also, I think everybody's comments are genuinely interesting, and I kind of want to talk about them. So there we go. So I'm gonna try to split the difference and cut it down just a hair. But much appreciated. So Josh Cronin says, I just love watching this podcast because each of your views, newbie and long-term fan, are like me. This episode never stuck out as bad to me. I enjoy it. I always enjoy learning more about our characters' past. You bring up a good point, Mike. Kira's comment at the end was a little out of place. Never noticed it before. Overall, it's an okay episode. I give it 71 self-sealing stem bolts. So here is the beginning of the analysis of who was right about last week's episode. Was it Keith or was it Mike? Was it Kira or was it Odo? Was Kira's coming down on Odo reasonable or unreasonable? So I came down on the side that it was actually pretty reasonable because there was not a moral equivalence to her situation and his.
Shall we keep a tally, Keith?
I think we should. So you're going to have to be the adjudicator of that.
Okay,
so Josh comes in on your side.
Okay.
Let's see what YouTube viewer has to say. YouTube viewer says this episode is like a delicious sandwich on really crappy bread. I strongly disagree with Keith when he says that Kira was justified and Odo was not. Minor spoiler, in a mere 3 episodes, The Darkness and the Light, we get a very solid example of dark things Kira did in the Resistance. In the context of the Star Trek literary universe, Cardassians are clearly the bad guys and Bajorans are clearly the good guys. But in Deep Space Nine, things are not always clear-cut. You don't get a free pass to be morally justified in anything and everything you do just because you are the victim and the other side is the oppressor. We have lots of episodes showing nice Cardassians and lots of episodes showing awful Bajorans. Okay, so here's the thing. I think perhaps I wasn't clear, but I disagree with your analysis, not based on the logic of your analysis, but I think the point that I was making is not that one was good and one was bad, but that they were not morally equivalent. And so they're both gray, right? I don't think there is a absolute good or absolute evil in this situation. It's more which was worse tangibly than the other, not justifying anything Kira did, but just saying that Odo's point of view is a darker shade of gray than Kira's. That's my point. YouTube viewer says 65 out of 100 self-sealing stem bolts. This episode was okay. It feels like it was worse than okay because season 5 is so awesome in general and that the okay episodes seem crappy by comparison. I agree with that. Edit. Also, Keith, you should grow his beard. Keith should grow his beard back ASAP. Mike should go the other way. Well, let me tell you, YouTube viewer, I feel like you and I understand each other in a way that we are both kind of contrarians. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I got a nice clean shave this morning, kind of exclusively because of that.
To summarize, though, I got another tally, though. That's 2 for me.
You did.
I mean, that's almost 2 tallies because he was pretty adamant, but I'll...
Look, if being adamant made you win, I'd win everything I've ever said, and I'd lose most of what I say. So
that's fair.
JD says, who are these young men on my show? Hope you find my guys and bring them back soon. This is such a confusing episode to me. It does nothing for the characters. It doesn't even affect Odo, really. I love Kurtwood Smith, but it's not enough. 60 self-sealing stem bolts. Quark's Bar... Quark's Bar, you get me. Says Kira was 100% justified. Imagine finding out your best friend used to be a racist towards your entire species, to the point of knowingly sending innocent people to their deaths because, quote unquote, the rest of you wouldn't smarten up. We at Quarks have ended friendships for far less. Yeah, 100%. Although I don't know if I would say that Odo knowingly put them to their, at least in this example of the episode, I don't think he knowingly put them to the death. He didn't find out that they were innocent until after they had been executed. But he certainly let it happen and had to have known that he was letting it happen based on how he was adjudicating Cardassian law. Okay, I believe that means it's 2-1.
2-1. 2-1.
2-1. So let's see what Harry Pothead has to say. He says, my issue is kind of in line with what Mike is saying right now, because this is not for this episode specifically, but for the character of Odo overall. Renee is playing the youngest character on the show, with the exception of Jake and Nog. The guy right now is in his early 20s as far as his sentient self goes. And I completely agree, which is why I think Odo is to be open for forgiveness. Mm-hmm. I don't think Odo, Odo having had these viewpoints and having had these behaviors means that he is beyond forgiveness or beyond capacity for change at all.
Right.
All I'm saying is that the mistakes that he made were not the same caliber of mistakes that Kira made. So, but I believe that is a vote for you, Mike. Mm-hmm. Harry continues, I'm giving this one 78 STEM bolts. It's nice to see the actors get to do something a little different. It's nice to get a little background on
98?
78.
Oh, okay. Misheard. I was like, wow, man. That's a swing.
It's up there. It's nice to get a little background on how Shiz really was with the Kardashians. Written Kardashians. Could tell you're voice texting. And it's nice to have confirmation that Odo is a typical Republican voter. He just follows whoever claims to have the most amount of power and struts around like he's got the biggest stick. A bootlicker, in other words. Odo is and shall ever be known as a bootlicker. Yeah. Kevin Miles does not have an opinion on this side, merely says, I give this episode 90 self-sealing stem bolts. Hibernation Pod says, also, what happened to that stem bolt competition you used to do? Unless I missed something, I enjoyed that. Maybe it was hated by others. You know what? This is yet another feedback about this segment that comes down to my laziness. Because I just didn't want to do math.
My response was good.
Your response was what?
My response on the YouTube.
I don't read your responses.
Oh, I said we just got tired of me winning. That's what we got tired of.
Oh, yeah. Well, something like that. Hibernation Pod continues.
I don't read your responses. Well, you've been watching the Easter eggs now, though, I bet.
Oh, no.
You made such a big deal of it last week, and you don't even.
Because I noticed it. I mean, in Easter
last week you got put on blast.
Oh, did I? Oh, great. See, Easter eggs are much more satisfying if you come upon them by surprise.
It's true. Much like the Easter bunny.
Now I have to go back and watch it, find out what ass of myself I made. This episode is going to be much, much worse. Hibernation continues. This one may have had the ingredients for a good episode that just did nothing to make it satisfying. All for what, really? Leaves me with little to care about, though I do like the darkness and ominous nature of it all. 60 self-sealing stem bolts. And, of course, Mysterious Anne comes in and says, "What? I don't know. What's she gonna say? What side is Mysterious Anne? Because I feel like Mysterious Anne might be our moral authority on the show.
I'm not sure she would want that, but I would agree with you.
I mean, I think that's just where we are." She says, I give it 70 stem bolts. It's really good, but I wish that one last scene were more fully delivered on my concerns they raise about Odo's authoritarianism. Thank you. The scene where Odo and Thrax as Odo is chilling. But that terrifying authoritarianism isn't what Kira confronts Odo with at the end. She confronts him for making a mistake in the investigation. That's a distraction from the real problem and lingering questions that we uncover about Odo's character in this episode. The problem we've uncovered isn't that he made an error. It's that he made the error because he believes Bajorans needed to accept their place in history, and that law and order was more important than real justice. What the episode does best is reveal the mindset behind colonialism occupation, and that they don't pull any punches with that. The way Garrick, Quark, Dukat, and Odo all talk and act in this episode is very real. I'm glad that they had the courage to go there, especially with a main hero character, Odo, and ambiguous characters who we really want to love, Quark and Garrick, and a villain who is confusingly likable at times, Dukat. So once again, and very much team me, but I think she encapsulates really what my point was better than I ever made it, as she frequently does. That the issue here is Odo's authoritarianism, and that is the scary part. That is what his sort of monologue there as Thrax, as Odo, saying that like that is the part that is harder to forgive. That is the bigger leap there. So, all right. Well, we didn't do that any faster,
No.
but
Keith, do you have? I have to ask you maybe the craziest question of all the pod. Is there a cobweb on your webcam?
There is not a cobweb, but there is a cat hair.
Okay, I've been watching it float for the past 10 minutes, and I can't unsee it.
Wow, I was not expecting that question, but
I know it tickled me.
I hear you. Well, but the other part about recording these in the afternoon, I'm going to get a sunbeam right in my face coming up in just a few minutes. So if you're watching this along, take bets on when I'm going to be blinded and have to stop reading. All right, so we're finally here. Let's talk about The Ascent, which aired on November 25th, 1996, Thanksgiving time. Ate on a full stomach, no doubt. The top song continued to be, can't wait to hear it, No Diggity, Blackstreet featuring Dr. Dre.
No diggity, I got to back it up to the Thanksgiving table. Feeling kind of herky-jerky when I eat that tofurkey. Wait, not tofurkey. What's the thing John Madden made famous? The turducken.
Turducken.
Yeah, that would have been a tougher rhyme.
Showing some plucking, this eating this turducken. Afterwards, no.
some sucking, shucking.
Look, I'm trying not to have to mark our episodes explicit because we definitely get a different amount of views based on whether or not we're explicit.
Come on, turducken.
So
nothing
we have
wrong
to
with that.
Allude.
There's nothing wrong with taking one meat and shoving it up the butt of another meat and then eating that meat.
No shade, as long as it's consensual, as long as the duck, the turkey, and the chicken all consent to this endeavor, then go
consent
to town.
And assent.
They will have to ascend the turkey hole. And then the chicken has to ascend the duck hole.
Further. Yeah, there's so many holes.
I'm so sorry, everyone.
And all of them make noise. You know what I mean? Okay.
All right.
Who directed this one, Keith?
Well, we have to talk about the top movie, which, Mike, this is a really big deal.
Okay.
And I think this might be our moment to announce what we are going to be doing on Monday night, June 10th, because the top movie was none other than Star Trek First Contact.
Man, it's been so long since I've seen that.
And we will be watching it live with the patrons at patreon.com/K&M. Anybody who has a paid subscription at any level, down to $1, can do the live watch along with us on Monday, June 10th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We are all going to watch it together. And if you can't make it, don't worry. It will be archived up online. Obviously, we can't do this publicly because, but we're very excited to do it. We're going to, be a little bit more competent than we are today. But it's going to be really, really fun. It's a fantastic movie. It will be a great time. And before we see this, don't worry. I know there's some folks out there worrying. Mike hasn't seen Best of Both Worlds.
No.
So Mike and I are going to watch Best of Both Worlds before we do that. And that will also be up on the Patreon feed as a bonus.
Got you. So that's going to happen before we watch First Contact?
We have to watch that before we watch First Contact because
Sunday night, I guess, you and I have a little date.
Great.
Yeah.
Sunday night. It'll be a Sunday night Best of Both Worlds will be super fun.
And that is that, what episode is that? Is that a TNG?
It is the Next Generation. It is the season 3 finale and the season 4 premiere. The first major cliffhanger in Star Trek history.
Since we're talking about this, I recall, and had I done any preparation, I would have pulled up the trailer. But like I mentioned, was never a Trek guy. But the hype surrounding this, for whatever reason, I did like TNG enough that I remember opening weekend going to the King of Prussia Prince Theater. Or it might have been the King or the Queen. We had a King, Queen, and Prince Theater, and saw this. I remember seeing it.
Is that the last time you did see it?
Well, 100%.
Was in the theater. I also saw it in the theater, of course, because my Uncle Jim worked on the movie. This is the last movie before Sean came on and worked on the movie series.
November. What's the date?
1996. November 25th, 96.
Yeah. So, Keith, this would have been, because I got my license on my birthday, on November 13th. So this would have been the first feature film I ever drove myself to.
Oh, my God. What a big moment.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to talk about all of that with the patrons when we go live on Monday, June 10th, 2024. If you're watching this, years in the future, you won't be able to watch it with us live, but you can watch it archived at patreon.com/K&M. Star Trek First Contact. It's amazing. There was nothing on TV because we were just watching Star Trek First Contact. Or we were watching Voyager, and they did the episode The Q and the Gray. You have to, does Q show up? I don't know. It's possible.
Well, how did they spell it?
It wasn't spelled like a line.
Okay, there you go.
There it is. The weekly world news headline. Mike, first, I want to give you the way. Did you pull up the TV ratings? You're welcome to do your segment.
I didn't. No, I didn't.
Okay, I was trying to save time because obviously. But all right, so the space alien shot by a Nevada hunter, and if you're wondering, that looks pretty familiar. Did that episode?
100%.
Did that thing happen before? Yeah. It sure did.
Yeah.
I actually looked for it, couldn't find it, but we 100% at some point dealt with that exact same story and that exact same picture.
And that same crappy puppet.
Same crappy puppet and the
Rambo cosplay
tough face.
Yeah.
Clearly not an actor. It's like Jim Bob.
Oh yeah.
Make an angry face. It's amazing.
What do you think the buyout for those was? $50? Yeah, probably.
If that.
Yeah.
Can't even imagine. I mean, and obviously it's perpetual use because they reused it over and over again.
Oh hell yeah.
All right, so The Ascent was directed by Alan Croker, who last directed The Assignment this season. It was written by showrunner Ira Stephen Bear and Robert Hewitt Wolfe, which means it's time to hit our most important segment. Now, Keith, waste your time with trivial trivia. All right, so in the shuttlecraft scene, Quark offers to play a game called Fizbin. That was the game that Captain Kirk makes up in the episode A Piece of the Action way back in 1968, if you would believe that. Pretty cool. Nice little Easter egg there. And I don't remember the context of when he made it up, whether he actually finished out and made it a full game, or whether he just, because obviously it became a full game at this point. So the outdoor scenes for this episode were filmed in Whitney Portal, 10 miles west of the town of Lone Pine, California. Whitney Portal is an area on the eastern slope of Mount Whitney, a 14,505-foot mountain in eastern California, the highest mountain in the contiguous USA. It's the difference between the mountains in the west and the east are so different because I grew up in a town called Underhill, which is literally on the side of Mount Mansfield, which is the tallest of the Green Mountains, and I think it's 6,000 feet, something like that. Anyway, beautiful. The altitude of the filming location and the rising temperatures caused Armin Shimmerman, who normally had no issues with the Quark prosthetic, to nearly pass out. As a result, there were fears among the cast and crew that the entire episode would have to be canceled. Fortunately, the on-set medic had been prepared for the altitude reactions and was able to ensure that Shimmerman was still able to shoot. According to Shimmerman, the medic's the hero of that episode. And lastly, before this episode was ever written, actors Renee and Armin, who played Odo and Quark obviously, were eager to learn more about the motivations behind their characters' relationships. As such, Shimmerman preempted this episode by saying, Renee and I would like to learn their reasons for liking and hating each other. So we need to see them together for an entire episode. What would be the result of that scenario? Are they going to reach an understanding? Will their relationship improve or worsen? And here we have an opportunity to do that. Mike, we've already pitched what they're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell us who the people are who are currently eligible to watch Star Trek First Contact with us?
Oh, that magic link, Keith, that will bring them to a server self-hosted on my computer so that we're not actually infringing on anything. We include Brian Kimball Beersock, Jason Moe, Peter Bank, Frank Rinch, Quark's Bar. Quark's Bar and I are in a fight because he doesn't agree with me, but we'll get over it. We'll come to an understanding. Merritt Neath, Joshua Cronin, Ryan Chesley, Andrew Hayes, Anna Mysterious, and Walter. Worf Big Ol' Boot Shivs, Charles Babbage, Harry Pothead, Alan, Anton Thies, Carl Fisher, CRM Productions, Nikolay, Ivanovich, Lobachevsky, Delusions at Noon, YouTube viewer, James Hubbard, The Hibernation Pod, JD Makes, Colin Daig and Chris Mitchell, Pat, Josh Cronin, JD, Lutz, and Wyatt Eldridge. Can't wait to see it Monday night. Bring a beverage. Bring your sense of humor. We'll see you there.
Oh, yes. Going to bring your sense of awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That movie is so much fun. All right, so our guest stars...
Hopefully we'll have some new patrons making their first contact with us.
Ooh, it's possible. It's possible.
It's not impossible.
It's not likely, but it is... But it is not technically impossible at patreon.com/KNM. All right, so our guest stars this week, we have no new aliens or guest stars of the week. We just have our recurring stars, Max Grodenchik as Rom and Aaron Eisenberg here as Nog. What do you say we go into the screening room?
That just reminds me of the HBO, how what the HBO opening used to be. Do you remember that?
Oh. Wow. All right, so the Ascent. We can do it. So Jake is moving out to his own place to the other side of the station.
Up.
And Ben is not taking it well. He's naturally sad, but Jake is establishing boundaries in a healthy way. And he's moving in with Nog, who is back from the academy. This is going to be fun because I did not watch Mike's watch along, so I have no idea what you thought about this episode. Meanwhile, other proud father, Rom, is waiting for Nog with great anticipation. Quark shows up first with some root beer for Nog. And Odo then comes... So let's just get these two scenes in. So we have the dueling kid coming back, kid moving out, and the proud fathers here. I thought that Jake and Ben's interaction here was great.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was... you're still my kid. I'm going to miss you. I'm nervous, but also like allowing him to sort of come out of the nest a little bit and and establish some boundaries with his father. And Ben is respecting that, but also wanting to stay involved. I thought that was really sweet.
Yeah, their relationship's great. I love this sort of birdie leaving the nest vibe for Ben. And I also just love when Ben and Jake are together because, to be quite frank, I just wish my father was able to talk to me like that and express emotion like that and seeing Ben be able to do it, I don't know, sort of scratches that itch for me. So it's really lovely. And as far as Nog is concerned, I love that every time we get to see new Rom, I love it. And I like him not taking BS from Quark, even though Quark's trying to lay it off on.
That's right.
Here.
And
Nope.
it shows a lot. Obviously the progression of Rom is like a big part of the show, but the fact that it's stuck, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't just stick up to Quark in an episode and that was sort of that. And then we went back to the old dynamic. Well, it's not that anymore.
Right.
And Rom now literally pushes back against Quark when he's being a problem. So it's great, and his pride for his son is, I think, just it's very moving, and so it's great. Really like the two father-son dynamics here. But it is all interrupted when Odo comes in and arrests Quark. He has been subpoenaed by the Federation grand jury, but they don't know what for. And Odo, of course, assumes that he is the person targeted. But we're going to find out more about that later. But that's our teaser. And so in Act 1, Odo and Quark, they're going to have to take a runabout on a long journey. It's going to take forever. And Quark is bored and wants to play cards. And of course, Odo is not interested. They banter for a bit, and Quark calls Odo a miserable, self-hating misanthrope. So we're doing sort of a take on Waiting for Godot a little bit of The Odd Couple in both of these episodes. And I'm wondering how far away is it? It takes 8 days in a runabout.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, there's no other technology that can get us there faster?
Well,
8 days at warp, I guess?
8 days at warp, but the runabouts, it's not like they can go warp 9. I don't know. Somebody out there, what is the max warp of a runabout? I think it's like 4 or 5, something like that.
And also, if it seems an awful waste, and I guess it's gonna. They do play it out here, but we get our first taste of sort of. Odo makes a lot of mistakes early here, as far as like as security officer, right? This is like he has no backup out here. He's so excited to get to see the comeuppance of Quark here that he overlooks so many things. Now, granted, he continues to do that throughout the episode, so I can't fault it as a wormhole, but it is interesting. We get to see that his hubris here a little bit really gives them the gets him in the can.
Well, the only mistake that I see him making is not noticing the bomb.
Well, I mean, I think that counts for a few. A.
Yeah.
And B, he later mentions, he goes, had I known, this was part of the Obsidian Order or whatever it was, I would have had
the
Ryan Syndicate. I would have had you on a more secure ship. I would have had backup. And all of those things would have helped in their predicament.
But I don't think that the lack of information is because Odo didn't ask for it. I think it's classified. I think they refused to tell him what was going on, and so.
Yeah, traveling alone is still suspect.
Well, it is a little bit in opposition because, like, I would justify the fact that they're on a runabout and not on a ship or a transport or whatever that would be faster, is that they're trying to lay low. They're trying to sneak a little bit and not draw attention to the fact that this important witness is going. But Odo wouldn't have made that decision because he doesn't know.
Right.
He thinks Quark's the bad guy. But maybe that decision was mandated by Starfleet. Mm-hmm. Here's, you have to bring him here, and you have to bring him here in this way.
Yeah, and maybe Odo doesn't want to let on that he probably would be upset if someone gave him a need to know mission and they're like, you don't need to know. He'd probably be a little salty about that.
Oh, for sure. And he even admits that he's pretending to know more than he does to try to get Quark to confess to something.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a little bit of a game here. So Quark then discovers Odo is reading a cheesy romance novel, which I thought was pretty hilarious. And Renee's embarrassment burns through the prosthetics. Mm-hmm. I love the little detail here. Odo reading a cheesy romance novel, like, hilarious.
Not only that, it gets better because we find out that Quark has written a few.
Well, I mean, the Holosuite programs, yeah. He's like, skip the novel, get right to the, get right to the Holosuite. So Odo tells Quark he is going to spend the rest of his life in a penal colony, and Quark asks what the charges are. And Odo says he can't discuss the specifics with anybody. Now, of course, Quark here, is Quark playing dumb when he says, oh, tell me what the charges are? Because he knows he's a witness. Later we find out he knows he's a witness and he's not being charged. So is he just baiting Odo there?
Actually, I didn't even think about that in the moment. That's a very good point. Yeah, what would be his motivations for doing that? Maybe, I guess, so clearly, I think in Quark's line of questioning, he probably easily sniffed out that he's all bark here, that Odo's all bark here, has no idea what's up. And so, yeah, I think he's playing with his food a little bit. But interesting that he makes the choice not to just fully out him. I think he wants to see how it plays out because...
Well, they've got 8 days to do their little dance, and that's what they love doing.
They sure do.
But it is interesting retroactively thinking that like Quark knows he's not charged with anything.
Keith, I just think we need to take a moment, carve out a moment, and applaud ourselves for just allowing Penal Colony to just stay as a descriptor for the type of colony where he believes he's going to go to. You know.
Yes.
We are
the classy, just so classy, so elegant. The Thinkers Deep Space Nine podcast for sure. Anyway, later Nog arrives in Sisko's office in his cadet uniform. He is here for his sophomore year field study, which is a nice way to get him back on the ship. Didn't they do that with Wesley Crusher too? To get him back. You don't know.
Now, some would say that Rom in his uniform is packing his own penal colony.
And we ruined it.
I wasn't sure if I got that screenshot, but I did.
Look, hats off, Rom.
Yeah,
he is standing at attention.
Yeah.
I mean, look, in that ridiculous outfit.
But you know what I pointed out on the watch along, and I stand by this. Why don't all of the uniforms have cargo pockets? It seems like in that type of a uniform that everybody's wearing such tight stuff, you'd think you'd need some pockets somewhere.
Oh, for sure. And the only reason they don't is aesthetic.
Yeah. I mean, at least
they want to look sleek and cool.
That's the first uniform I've seen in a long time that's remotely functional. The only other functional piece of clothing I saw was that Tribbles guy with his
shoulder pockets.
Mm-hmm. Everybody knows you need some pockets.
Well, at least by the time we get to Deep Space Nine, they're 2 pieces. There's a pants and a shirt, and not one big gummy
everybody just
jumpsuit.
needs butt flaps because there's no way you can go to the bathroom in that thing.
The first couple seasons of Next Gen, those things are ridiculous. Any human being, they had to have been so emaciated to not look like blueberries. It's craziness. All right. Anyway, Sisko tells Nog on a personal level that he's happy that Jake and Nog are going to be rooming together, and they're going to have a lot of fun. And Nog says, "Yes, sir. Time permitting, sir. I mean, if we're not too busy after all, I'm here to work. Don't worry, I'll look after him for you. Set a good example. Keep him out of trouble." And Sisko is somewhat confused by this new, serious, uptight Nog. Later, Nog and Jake arrive in their quarters. They've got an interesting setup. Little nooks with beds on either side of the room, with a small living area between them. So it's more of like a dorm room than an apartment.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's laid out reasonably well, but there's absolutely no reason they couldn't have doors around their beds.
The whole thing is a little ridiculous. It feels very empty, but yeah.
Tell us your thoughts, Mike.
It feels a little. I get the point. I like it. It's just the design was weird. Like you'd think they'd make it a little more bachelor-y. Well, they just moved in, but
they just moved in, and they don't have anything yet, right? They don't have any furniture. All they have is clothes, right? They don't have really sort of possessions yet.
Also, how does it work? They get set up with a spot, or are they paying rent? There is no money, right? It's just like
there's no money, but I think, and it's the same thing on the ship. It's a little bit like military, where as you ascend in rank, you get better housing.
Okay.
So because they're just a cadet and a civilian, they're in the you get a bunk, not a cab, or
it's like the Bed-Stuy of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's more like a cruise ship, right?
Mm.
Like they're the lowest level employees, so they don't get a window, and which is why they have to share and have this weird room where they have to make eye contact at night.
Inside cabin, yeah.
Yep. So, anyway, Nog immediately starts barking orders and about cleaning and bedtime and working out. And Starfleet Academy has turned Nog into a pain in the ass. Which I'll have more thoughts on later about like going back to college or coming back from college with a wildly different personality. Like I totally get it.
No, it's different. It's even more than that, right? Like I had a buddy named Brian, and he went and became a Marine, and I didn't see him. We graduated high school. He went off to the Marines, and he was like he was a different kind of dude, right? He like set off a pipe bomb at the school, like a smoke bomb and a stink bomb. Like he was like a well-meaning cut up. But
he was a ruffian.
He was a ruffian. But anyway, he came back and was just like a different human being.
Yeah,
like a different human being. The military will do that to you,
and that is sort of what Nog is doing. So it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, 100%.
He would come back because you have the dueling things, right? You have the military training, which changes your mind and your behavior and your habits and all of that in a very extreme way, especially at the beginning of service. But you also have your 18, 19-year-old brain, which also just thinks in very extreme ways. At least it was my experience that college age brain was the most strident, most extreme, most black and white thinking that I ever had.
Yeah. You definitely think you know everything. And once again, I've never been in the military, and none of my direct family members have served, so I'm not speaking from a place of authority. Just this one example, but there are, I know a few people who've been in the military, and there are differences, right? Like there are some guys who served and it changed them and it changed their thinking and they have very strong thoughts, and then there's a few of those guys who like are career military guys. They loved it. They love the order, they love the service, they love the bit of it, and they behave different, those two groups of subsets of people. And Rom is definitely the latter so far.
Yeah, no, Rom feels like a career guy for sure. So Sisko is somewhat confused by this. Oh wait, no, I already said. Well, I mean, I guess it's also true of Jake Sisko. He's also somewhat confused about what's happening here.
Because Jake thought it was going to be a bachelor pad style.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, let's set up the Xbox.
Well, I think he was more, let's go to the holosuites was his first. Let's go get drunk and go to the holosuites. But
well, I mean, but it's like when we moved in, we had the Xbox because there was no magic sex robot room.
Yeah, I know. Now they'd be like, okay, here's the room with the Meta Quest VR headset, and hooked up to this tablet. Do what you want.
Do they have that?
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
Oh, I've never had a VR headset because it makes me nauseous and it's heavy and expensive. But
it's not much difference. It's not like much difference. It's just it's a point of view scenario. But I've heard.
I see. Your older brother told you once.
Yeah, I read it in a magazine one time.
Just for the article, so you read the article about it.
Yeah, it was weird that the pages stuck together, but it's cool.
Oh, there we go. Okay, well. Meanwhile, on the runabout, Odo and Quark keep bickering. They've been flying for 4 days, and the odd couple are at each other's throats. Quark complains about a noise he can hear buzzing that's been buzzing for the last hour. And it turns out to be a bomb. And that is the end of our act. I had the thought just come to me right this very minute. Why was there such a long delay on the bomb? Right? Because the purpose is to kill Quark so he can't testify. Why did they wait 4 days? Why did they just blow it at the minute they got into the runabout?
I'll do even better, yeah. Clearly you knew which runabout they were going to go on, that you knew when they were going to get on it. I guess you could make the argument they didn't know when they were going to take off and go. So they couldn't just have it. But you would make it a proximity bomb, right? They wanted to make sure they got Quark.
Yes. And we know that the Orion Syndicate has, obviously if they're able to get into a Federation runabout, which essentially is like getting into a military vehicle. Okay,
well hold on. Let's say that you're gonna
I don't want you testifying against me.
Yeah, in a California trial, and I know you have an 8-hour flight, right? So depending on delays
and
whatnot, I'm not going to make the bomb go off in the first couple hours. I'm going to make it towards the end of the flight, so I know that despite delays and whatnot, you definitely got on the plane and are in the air. So we could maybe they
I
had the bomb
suppose
set
that's
off
true.
to go day 6, so they knew that.
Right, like halfway, because
Yeah.
you know they're going to be in the journey. All right, I'll buy that.
Why didn't they
So,
hide the bomb better? Is what I'm thinking. Like, why is it in like one little grate in the front room? Like, put it down in the engine room or something.
Well, or why not make it big enough just to blow up the whole runabout? Because they put it up in the cabin because that's where they were.
Yeah.
Or were likely to be. But I guess
the wormhole is like the bomb plot is flimsy at best. If they had a guy sneak in to put it in the runabout, why not just like have an assassin go kill Quark?
I feel like there would be easier ways to kill Quark,
Mm-hmm.
but I think all right. Here's how I fix it. Because they want it to look like an accident.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to just take out Quark. They want to take out Quark in a way that they had a mysterious accident while they were flying, as opposed to we just mowed him down on the promenade. Because I don't think the Orion Syndicate wants us blowing back on them.
So this means that whoever assassin we hire, Keith, is we're going to need proof. So we're going to need them to send Odo's ears back in a box.
Oh, yeah, proof of death.
Mm-hmm. And then we'll auction them off.
Okay, great. So in Act 2, they try to beam the bomb off of the runabout, and of course it only half works. The runabout is damaged, and they are forced to crash land on the closest planet, which is a Class L, barely habitable. So Odo says, if we live through this, whoever planted the bomb is going to regret it. Quark says, believe me, you don't want to go anywhere near the Orion Syndicate. The Orion Syndicate? Is that who the grand jury's investigating? I thought you knew. If I knew you were involved in the Orion Syndicate, we'd be on the Defiant right now, surrounded by half of my deputies. Well, there you go. So they crash land on the side of a mountain and wake up. The comm system has been destroyed. The replicator has been destroyed. And they have almost no food because most of the rations were destroyed. And Odo says, now we either freeze to death or starve to death. Take your pick. And so our odd couples. So here we are. We're stuck. We've set up the problems that we're having. Fine, is it all convenient that we get there? Sure, but you got to find a way to get them out there, and you have to put them in peril somehow.
Yeah, who are going to be the problem solvers, and who will be the mopers?
Yeah. Interestingly, how frequently Odo's the moper.
Mm-hmm.
So the other odd couple's time isn't going that well either. Jake is refusing to work out with Nog and discovers that Nog has read and rewritten parts of Jake's latest story, which is one of the second episode of Deep Space Nine, past prologue. This naturally pisses Jake off. You can't change a writer's words without his permission. That's sacrilege. Yes, it is. Don't you mess with my words. We will, a lot of times, to go into the theater world, a community theater or a high school or a local theater will change stuff in the musical, like, oh, we're going to cut that song from Shrek, or like, oh, we're not going to have a gay character, we're going to rewrite it as whatever. And if you do that, we will sue you because you signed on for that show. You got to do that show.
Keith, interesting. I'll keep it real. We had to do. There's some nips and tucks in this production of Forever Plaid because the artistic director is not a huge fan of the show, and there are some things he just thinks that are too silly, blah blah blah. And I had to, you have to pick your battles and whatnot. And a lot of the times he's like, "Well, defend it," and I was like, and I found myself often going to, "Okay, it's in the script." That's my defense. It's in the script. It's in the script,
and you signed a contract.
Yeah, we bought the rights to the play. Yeah, there's some hokey little sticky stuff in the play, but if it's something I added, then yeah, we can cut it. But if it's something that's in the play, you gotta prove me. And then he's like, but I write the check, and I was like, you're right. Okay, let's cut.
Yeah, well, you write the check, but you wrote a check and signed a contract to do the show. You were not allowed to. It says in the first page. Right at the very top of the contract, you can't change this, and everybody does.
Everybody does, yeah.
And it pisses me off. Anyway, so on the planet, Quark has pulled out the giant subspace transmitter, and they need to haul it to higher ground.
Also, by the way, time out. We have to back up. These weights that I imagine are like grav weights, is what the buttons are and all that stuff. Awesome. Cool prop. Love it.
Space shake weights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you're dealing with artificial gravity, you'd be able to just tell it what weight you want it to be.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Pretty cool, yeah. So, so they have to get the transmitter to higher ground to get the signal out, because they broke the amplifier or whatever, and they have to go all the way up a giant mountain. And in Act 3, they're both freezing. But Quark has found a survival suit, and naturally, there's only one. So they're going to have to share.
Hey, costume department, make me the most ridiculous thing you can possibly think of so we can make them do drama in it.
I mean, but that's kind of what like a spacesuit looks like.
Yeah, it's like a radiation suit kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like one of the those plastic blankets or whatever you get after a marathon.
RuPaul's Drag Race, start your engines.
I think we should do a drag race where you dress up as Quark.
Wait, why am I dressing up? I thought you were gonna have us do that, like the characters in like doing a drag runway.
No, that's not fun. I want to see you dress up as Quark.
Well, how? You gonna send me costumes?
No, you have to make it out of things in your house.
This isn't that show. Drag Race, they don't have to make their own. I guess they do. Okay.
Well, see, you watch Drag Race, I watch Project Runway.
Yeah.
Basically the same thing.
Make it Quark.
Make it Quark. All right, so together they start to haul the transmitter up the side of a mountain, swapping the carrying and the survival suit. And we are now in a practical location, which is gorgeous.
It is gorgeous, and they are just walking back and forth in one place, and not actually ascending anyway, but it's just clearly just them going this way, and then that way, and then this way again.
Well, I mean, till they get to the end. Yeah, I mean, and are they just choosing any location that there's a pull-off spot on the road?
Yeah.
Of course, but that's TV, buddy. That's just how TV works.
Just so overexposed, too. It's tough to film outside.
Super tough to film outside. And I believe the director was a documentary director before. So I think that's part of why they used him, because he's used to filming in difficult to shoot in outdoor locations because you can't control the lighting. So Odo points out that if he were still a shapeshifter, we could have solved all of this in 5 minutes. And they have an interesting conversation here, because I think this does get to it. Quark says, "You're the one who wanted to be a solid." "I never wanted to be a solid. Oh, please, I used to see you coming to the bar, watching Morn eat, eyeing the customers, gambling and flirting with the Dabo girls, and wishing you could be one of them. Not to mention your platonic friendship with a certain Bajoran major." Odo says, "If that's the kind of psychological insight you dispense with your drinks, it's a wonder you have any customers. Don't deny it all you want. But the fact is, your people gave you what you wanted. You're one of us now. And I can finally sit in a chair and know with absolute certainty it isn't you."
I thought that was the best line.
Yeah, and
he said something like, I don't have to trip over you or anything, like something like that. He said something. He had a sick burn.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the script, so I think it was that, but there might have been more. But it is interesting to, like, Quark's... I thought that Odo wanted to be a solid. I don't know. Because he's not Data, right? He never expressed a desire. I think he's always had a desire to fit in some way that he was. I think struggling with.
For sure. I think he was fascinated by the solid form more than anything else. You know, because he used to study it. He used to say it was so hard to replicate faces. I think he saw it as quite an interesting challenge. But you're right. But I could easily see how you could. And Quark is pretty emotionally intelligent, so perhaps he just was a better sort of therapist than.
I think
than
a part of him is right, for sure. So they keep arguing and climbing. And back on the station, Nog arrives home from working with O'Brien to find the apartment completely trashed by Jake, who is undoubtedly a giant slob. Also part of being 19. He claims to be writing a story, but Nog discovers he's just playing Candy Crush. Jake correctly points out that the creative process is mysterious and non-linear. And he's 100% right about that. So sometimes you do need to play Candy Crush, and it helps make the brain go.
I had an interesting conversation in a stand-up meeting today because, they're changing policies, thank goodness, my company, that you don't have to account for every hour of your freaking day where you have to be like, well, this was productive time, this was unproductive time, blah, 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 blah. And, some of us were very excited about that. They said, well, why is that exciting to you? And I was like, because sometimes, you know what the creative process is sometimes? Sitting there and thinking about something for 3 hours, right? Like that you don't actually are doing nothing. Thinking is a task, and that can't be accounted for with a simple productive, unproductive checkbox.
And there's the thinking part. I also think there's the recharging your brain part.
Yeah, fair, very fair.
Because your brain needs to rest, and your brain needs variety to be creative, to be successful, to work hard. And sometimes you need to take a walk and listen to a fantasy football podcast, and that actually does help you unlock your creativity, and you can make a leap and get something done in an hour that would have taken 10 hours of grinding.
But that doesn't mean you shouldn't pick up your panties from the living room.
You want to keep your drawers off the floor, or out of the replicator, more importantly. Because he definitely put his underwear in the replicator. That's where the food comes, Jake.
Mm-hmm.
But aim higher. So, anyway.
I had a real good one there, but I swallowed it.
Did you? Mm-hmm. Did you take the different highway? All right, anyway. So, cue the natural fight, in which both sides have pretty reasonable points. But in the end, Nog is moving out. Meanwhile, Quark and Odo have now been climbing for 3 days and are beginning to starve. And I think this is one thing that I'm not sure how I could have fixed it, but I would have liked a better sense of the time passing to sort of show the rising stakes in this. That I wish this episode had been the two of them.
Their attempt was by using the visual cue of showing that the mountain was still very tall, right? So they would do these B-roll cutaways where it was just like, see, the mountain's still tall, which means we have a long way to go. And I think we are to try to fill in the blanks, right, of how long of a hike it would be that they're not even making any ground.
Well, and they say we've been here for 3 days, and they're also doing a lot of work with the makeup to make them look a little more beat down. But I feel, cutting to the end of this would be and if they'd done it today, it would have been this. They weren't really allowed to back then, but it should have been start the episode with the two of them climbing out of a wrecked shuttle. And then the entire episode is their climb. And I think it would have given us a much better sense of the stakes, the progression, and so we can really start to fear for them.
Well, it's pacing too, right? Because they do this takes a huge chunk of the episode, and then Nog's final ascent, which still seems like they have a far way to go, happens very quickly. And so it throws off the timeline. In addition, I think there's an argument to be made that, like you said, the juxtaposition with the B story, which I like, but is much more low stakes. It kind of pulls these stakes down a bit.
It does, and I think in some way their bickering and that kind of stuff makes it feel more like comedy. And I get it. Like, we start with bantery, funny, and then the stakes sort of escalate as we go. But I think it, like, even though it takes up the majority of the episode, it still feels a little rushed. So that I have to sort of, you're sort of, and I think other than the broken leg, the stakes of this, they're telling as opposed to showing. And like, oh, it's so cold. Well, it's not. We can see that, right? And they're trying to explain it. And I think it just would have been better if they'd been able to spend the entire episode just as a two-hander of the two of them on a mountain.
And also, like, once again, technology. But like, if you're going to have part of this be, why can't it be just they're starving? If part of it's going to be they're freezing, the location they chose just is not visually it just doesn't tell enough of the story.
Clearly hot.
Yeah, it's like not just make them hungry. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, and they did try to explain it by saying that the sun of this is at a lower isn't as strong, and so
they're in Fresno.
If you remember from the eclipse, like the temperature change during the totality was really jaw-dropping, which I think lends credence to what they're dealing with here. But yeah, I just anyway, we'll get into it. So they think they're getting close to the top with only 6 more hours of climbing, only to get over the ridge and see that they're nowhere near the top. And anybody who has done any real hiking knows that feeling and has dealt with that feeling before. And in Act 4, another part of this that we recognize well, they have to get to the next mountain, which means climbing down the side of the first one. And Quark complains that every step down is another step up, which, like I said, all hikers know all too well. So Quark says, "You know what's going to make all of this worthwhile? The look on your face when they let me go." "Let you go? I don't think so." And Quark says, "And you call yourself a detective? The Orion Syndicate tried to kill me. They never kill their own. They don't need to. Any one of them would take their own life before they testify against the Syndicate. Don't you get it? I'm not a suspect. I'm a witness." So let me get this straight. You were never a member of the Orion Syndicate? I hate to disappoint you. You must have tried to join. I don't want to talk about it. If I remember correctly, the Orion Syndicate has a membership fee, quite a substantial one, and the Ferengi Commerce Authority did seize all of your assets. It's even worse than that, isn't it? You could never afford to join, could you? All those years of lying and scheming and cheating, you were still too small time for the Orions. I guess you're not as successful a businessman as you think you are. Which, really cutting to the quick there.
But interestingly, and it's definitely choices, Quark has such a much better poker face, right? If that hurt him, and it should, it does cut right to the soul of the Ferengi. You don't really see it, and his retort doesn't come with anger. It's incisive, it's surgical, and it kicks right back to Odo. I don't think you could pick a person here who would say that, if we were doing winners losers, would say that Quark lost this exchange. He did not. I think he handily wins.
I think Quark wins this whole adventure. Mm-hmm. And it actually sort of brings back the idea that I think it was a YouTube viewer was saying,
petulance.
That Odo, even though he is played by an older actor and looks older, is actually the youngest person here.
Yeah. He's definitely throwing a temper tantrum.
He's kind of throwing a temper tantrum, and he is sort of pretending to be wiser than he is. He's pretending to be more emotionally grounded than he is. He's pretending to be more secure than he is. I think it's an interesting character. But here is where we see Quark, even though he does jab Quark right where it hurts, Quark is still in control of this conversation, which sort of reverses the power dynamic that we're used to. Mm-hmm. Because Odo is the law, he's in charge, he has authority, but he doesn't have the power he thinks he does. So Quark's retort to all of that is that you're not as successful, and says, which means you've spent the last 10 years of your life trying to catch a nobody. Without much success, I might add. So you tell me which of us is the bigger failure. And I think that screenshot really does encapsulate how he feels about that rejoinder there. So back on the station, Rom goes up to Ben to ask about Nog. He's also noticed how much Nog has changed. And
time out. This is one of those examples of okay, in a tracking shot that we see them for 11 seconds.
Right.
Look at these aliens. How freaking awesome is that?
They're amazing.
That's
and
awesome.
We never see any of those.
Nope, that was just one quick shot.
And
probably 6 hours in the chair or something like that.
Oh, I'm sure. And for the one on the right, we could totally do an episode with that. The one on the left, one of the reasons we don't see more prosthetics like that is that he can't talk through that, because his mouth and his whoever it is, their mouth is buried. And the mouth of the prosthetic is well far away, and they're not going to animate it, or they're not going to make it a puppet, which is why you can't really do, at least you couldn't at that point, that extreme of a transformation, because you
which
can't
is
talk.
Also probably why that dude is staring at that piece of food on that fork and will never put it near his mouth.
Never, ever,
Just
ever.
wait for the camera to roll on by.
That's exactly right. So, Rum is confused by this very different Nog, and he hilariously took a blood sample to see if he was a secret changeling.
Which, as hilarious as it is, actually, we've seen very similar times where that was exactly the right thing to do.
Right, it's not as crazy as it seems. His logic for he's behaving with discipline, so he must be an alien, is ridiculous. But certainly, we're still fearing, changeling interference and infiltration for sure. So Sisko says he's just going through a phase, as is Jake. And Rom says, Nog says Jake is a slovenly, undisciplined, unfocused writer. And Sisko, to his credit, is like, it's not an unfair assessment, I'm afraid. Sometimes I wish Jake had a little bit of Nog's self-discipline. And Rom says, I wish Nog had Jake's ability to enjoy himself. There's your message. And they hatch a plan to get them talking again. Back on the planet, however, Quark is not doing well. And Odo hits him until he feels better, which I thought was funny. But Quark is now losing hearing in one ear and is freaking out. So they're trying to escalate the stakes here. They're trying to show that they have more time, and they're breaking down. I don't know if it's a time they could invest in the episode, like just minutes in an episode they could do here, or whether it should have been written differently. But it doesn't quite.
Yeah, we'll talk about it at the end. But for me, those are all like death by a thousand cuts. There are all little reasons, but the main reason is it's a tonal inconsistency. They set the episode and the two plot lines up as sort of rom-com / Three's Company,
and they're supposed
slapstick.
To dovetail together. Obviously, we have the two odd couples,
and in doing so, they remove their ability to actually express stakes, and so we don't really feel like there's ever any peril. And I have another larger critique, but I think that's the reason. And ultimately, it's a tonal failure.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. So they bicker some more and keep climbing until they bicker some more. Bickering some more. All right, that's what I wrote. Quark
the hair
says,
is really going for it now.
The hair. I mean, Odo's going full emo. Emodo. We need JD's picture again. And they start going freak, fraud, fascist, failure, which, interesting, from last episode, Quark does go with the fascist thing. And they begin to fight until Odo trips and falls and horribly breaks his leg.
That was the first time I was like, "Boh."
Yikes. Quark passes out too when he looks at it.
I didn't get a decent shot of it.
That's okay. It's gross.
Imagine Gumby. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Quark says, "You don't get it. I'm not." Quark splints Odo's leg and has fashioned a pretty impressive sled to drag Odo on. And Odo tells Quark to leave him behind, and Quark says, "You don't get it, do you? I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm taking you along as emergency rations. If you die, I'm going to eat you." I like it. I always joke about the cat who's going to eat me. So Quark then puts the transmitter on his back and begins dragging Odo up the mountain. Pretty heroically, frankly, that he's able to pull this off. They're both in pain and freezing, and Odo keeps dragging and dragging and dragging until Quark keeps dragging and dragging and dragging until he eventually collapses. He's done. He can't go any further. So Odo tries to drag the transmitter himself, broken leg and all. And so, I thought this is where the episode should have lived. Where we sort of really get a sense of, because it's kind of like an old Western, right? and it would have been cool to like live here.
Yeah, because
so
the give and take physically, I think is a more interesting counterpart to their verbal and emotional barbs, better than kind of seeing it with Jake and Nog, right? Like that battle is more interesting when we only get to see in the beginning, like first 75%, mostly it's just a verbal battle. And here, the introduction of the physical sort of back and forth is interesting, I think.
Well, and actually, the verbal battle, I think that's the other part that's really missing from this, because we play this all out in the sort of vein, like the archetype of the story, right? You have people who hate each other, and they're thrust in this situation together, and they fight and they fight and they fight, and then they struggle and they struggle, and it continues to escalate until they finally break down and have some vulnerability with each other. Mm-hmm. And then once they get back to normal, they hate each other again, but they have this secret thing, and it's all played out like those are the beats, but they're never actually vulnerable with each other.
Right. Even here, like you sort of get a pep talk from Odo, but it's more just shaming really than anything else. And he's like, "Yeah, Cisco would do it." And he's like, "I just carried your ass up a mountain."
They never break through, and I understand that you don't really want them to fully break through, right? Mm-hmm. You want to keep up their dynamic. Their friendship is told through barbs at each other. It is told through the conflict.
But now we're just doing the episode. But even that kind of vicious verbal back and forth at the beginning, or back at the bottom of the mountain.
Yeah.
You think maybe you're going to get the moment, like, when two people have like a scream match and they go to that place where they're just trying to hurt each other, but unfortunately you say some truths that generally don't get said.
Yeah.
We don't get that either. It's not like Odo's real hatred inside is because Quark is is a little bit of a
right, because yes, I mean, if the mission statement of the episode is to get to the bottom of why they hate each other, we don't.
No.
At all.
It's the same. In fact, it feels redundant because it's just Odo being like, "Oh, well, you do bad stuff, and you're finally going to go to prison." You're like,
it didn't actually answer any questions.
Yeah.
And it has the trappings of the episode that does. It has the plot points and the beats of the episode that does, but they don't ever do it.
Right.
It's interesting. All right. We'll keep going so we can get to the stem bolts. So Quark then gets up and retakes the transmitter, but this time has to leave Odo behind. Conceptually to his death. So back on the station, Ben comes in to check on his son. He announces that he's going to lose his apartment unless he takes Nog back. He tells them to sort it out, that's an order, and leaves. And I think here is where it sort of did work, because they both apologize to each other without apologizing. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just need a reset, and you don't need to have like the big heart-to-heart. And I think in this situation, with this level of stakes, that actually worked.
Yeah. Although some people do point out that in the watch along, which is pretty funny, that basically Jake just gives Nog what he wants. But ultimately I would be like, yeah, well, Jake was the slob. I mean, yeah, so he picked up a couple socks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. Well, but Nog says, let's go have some fun.
Yeah. It's definitely more a mutual understanding. I didn't agree.
It's mutual, and it's like, yes, like Nog comes. The only thing Jake does wrong is he's a slob, mm-hmm. whereas Nog is a little bit of a tyrant.
Yes, agreed.
And yes, and so Nog actually is the one who needs to make. I mean, they both need to. Don't get me wrong, but it's still anyway. But I thought that was very realistic mm-hmm. about like buddies, and especially at that age. You don't have the heart to heart. You're just like, yeah, we get it, and then you move on. So meanwhile, Quark is still climbing as the wind blows and ice starts to crust over his skin. And we had a big visual shift mm-hmm. Right here. That should have been the visuals of this whole adventure.
Yeah, like I would picture Luke on the ice planet. On Hoth,
right.
You know what I mean?
I think they were hoping for that, and maybe the weather did not. It was like, oh, we're hoping for like a gray overcast. It was a bright sunny day. Like, now what do we do? But I think and again, it's probably a budget and happenstance of weather, but like, had we spent the whole time with the wind blowing and the dark, that would have, I think, done a lot of the work.
This is basically Odo doing the Costanza.
Yeah.
We had another one, wasn't it? Remember when he was nude on the beach planet on the?
Yeah, doing the Sistine Chapel.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is slightly less seductive, but you never know. It depends on whatever floats your boat. Maybe that's your thing, and God bless you. So down the mountain, Odo records a final message, telling them where Quark's body will be and what he wants done with his remains. And here too
is Renee's 1996 headshot.
That should be my headshot these days.
It could be arranged.
I would have liked to have seen Odo soften a bit here, because he's still kind of a dick to Quark, even in the final death message. Like, he probably failed. He's a loser. Like, to have the moment where he's a little bit more gracious and softens up, and then is like, the minute he beams up, it's like, oh shit, quit, delete it, so Quark doesn't hear me say something nice about him. That would have made more sense.
Do we get to learn what their beef is ever?
No.
Yeah, I because what the lore tells me and what the character drive, I would argue that.
Oh, you mean in this episode or in the show in general?
In the show in general.
Oh, well, I'm not going to answer that.
Okay, because my read is, and I was hoping that we would learn it here, is that Odo spent so long trying to figure out who he was, establish his identity, and Quark knows who he is, and to a fault sometimes, stubbornly sometimes, but he's real confident in that, and I think Odo wants that, desires that, is jealous of that, and thus must use his kind of self-righteousness to find the faults in it. Oh, well, it's because he's a crook, and he's a this, and he's a that, and so that's the kind of dichotomy.
Which I like that story very much. It makes a great deal of sense. And again, thinking about college brain, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I was never more judgmental and never more like controlling and dickish and judgy and whatever than when I was in college, because I was never more insecure. Mm-hmm. I never knew myself less. I was never more rigid than when I didn't know who I was and didn't accept who I was.
College age brain, it was never the super talented people you were jealous of, right? It was the super talented people who were confident and knew they were super talented and didn't have to prove shit to anybody. Those are the people you're jealous of.
Right.
Because you can't. There's no pissing contest with them.
Well, because they're not feeling the discomfort that you are.
Right.
They're not in the agony of like, oh God, what do I do with my hands when I walk into this room? Did someone not make eye contact with me? Did they hate me? Oh my God, they made eye contact with me. I'm going to die. And it's just like, and I think Odo is feeling all of that. And again, the immaturity that leads to rigidity is kind of Odo's story. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's still just a little goo man in a beaker.
He is. I mean, Odo was me in college. Like a lot of people let their hair down when they go to college and relax. I did the literal opposite.
Well, I mean, Odo's definitely letting his hair down, but
well, that's fair enough. So anyway, just as he's recording that last message, he gets beamed out. Quark did get the signal through and saved them both. And our last beat is they talk in the infirmary, and both are relieved. And when they said they hated each other, that they reinforced they meant it. But of course, they mean the opposite. And so, again, the beat that would have been more earned had they shown some vulnerability.
Yeah, it's a shame because, as we'll learn in just a moment, that is the best beat. The performances there are pitch perfect, and it's the exact last scene. It's like they wrote that scene. They're like, okay, we got it. We just make the rest of the episode, and that's where that fell out.
They forgot
perfect.
to
they
write.
They played that scene perfectly, as if they had gone through a whole saga, like a trilogy worth of films, and they've come back here.
And all they go through is a physical saga. Mm-hmm. They don't get anywhere emotionally with each other.
Yeah.
They
I mean, really, if you break it down, Odo made a really asshole. Sorry, I cursed.
That's fine.
Made a really and make an ass of yourself when you make an assumption. He made an ass of himself because he made an assumption. Yep. It got them both almost killed, and then he never apologizes, and then he gets bailed out. That's what happens.
Yeah, it's not been a great couple of episodes for Odo.
No.
Yeah. All right. Let us continue talking about it in everyone's favorite. All right, so Mike, let us discuss any possible wormholes in the plot.
Well, we talked about it earlier. The bomb plot feels a little haphazard. Also, I felt like we didn't do a lot of troubleshooting. We realized early on, because ultimately, are we certain that carrying this giant thing up the mountain is the only shot we got? Maybe there's like a smaller peak. Maybe anything. Because where do we plug it in up there? Well, that seems...
Well, it's got its own power cell. But...
The whole plot seemed... Even their things seemed a little, like, drastic.
It was all sort of contrived to get to force him to climb the mountain. And, and I also think, like, the runabouts crash land, like, 3 times a week in the... in Star Trek. So you'd think they would maybe reinforce at least their rations, at least like, put some protein bars somewhere that won't get smushed. And even if they get smushed, who cares? Like,
also, like, I don't, this is maybe a conversation for a different podcast, but I don't want to be this guy because I was that guy. But I mean, shouldn't Jake get a job or something? I mean, Nog at least is contributing to this situation.
He's a writer.
What? That's not a job until it's a job. Okay.
Yo, hold on. Screw you. Go to hell.
But I mean, is he got a gig right now, or he's just writing?
He's just writing. We're past that. He's gonna publish. He's writing his novel.
I know. I just wanted to see you react to that.
Oh, go to hell. I hate you. I'm out of here.
I got nothing more specific. I mean, there's plenty.
Yeah. No. It's just. The how do we get them to whatever is sort of shorthanded, and it needs. Who cares? Like,
I mean, shouldn't they have had like a hiking shoe or something? I mean, it was very steep. That they didn't have good footwear.
Well, they weren't planning. They were planning to go to the grand jury. But yeah, I mean, it's all kind of shorthand, and I wouldn't care about it at all if they paid off the story beats.
Yeah.
Like, because we don't care, we don't even notice stuff like this if they pay off the emotional beats. All right, best moment.
Yeah, the last scene is it's another episode. We say this a lot on Deep Space Nine, man. I think it's 90s TV. I think it's TV. Is a lot of times the script. If you write a great opener and you write a great last scene, you feel like you did your gig, and then like the story writers have the writing room has its kind of way with the middle of the sandwich. And this is another one of those sort of victims of that. The last scene is great. And the performances are pitch perfect in that last scene of like, hey man, I hate you. I hate you too, brother. Right? Like we'll never be able to say, it's almost like Bashir O'Brien, right? We'll never be able to say I love you, but we say it in our own way. And we've learned the language as a viewer over the episode. And now it has that feels. And it still won that from me, even despite knowing there was no meat in the sandwich, really. So, tasty bread, I will say, in that last scene. Tasty bread.
Yeah, I think, I think that was good. I think that the performances post leg break, I thought were like, I thought that was where we got into someplace interesting, and so. Had that been the finale of something that had been set up differently, I think it would have been pretty satisfying. So, like, I like it when Odo horribly broke his leg, and then and what happened subsequent to that.
Yeah. Also, that's not a wormhole, but like a missed opportunity. Although I guess he does go for it. They are dying after all, but I think subsequent to his becoming a solid, this is his first like huge traumatic injury. So
Yeah.
that's a pretty crappy way to learn you're human and to have your leg go that way.
Like stub your toe first. Yeah. Yeah, no. And I think they could have played with that more. I think they could have been like, I've never been broken before. I've never seen a limb. I've never been damaged before. And like the shock of that, I think would be something worth, which again, 46 minutes of this, or 45 minutes of this 46-minute episode should have happened on the climb.
Keith, you know what? This episode is held together with like gummy bears and toothpicks and Band-Aids. You know what it could have used? A hefty dose of...
You get some stamps. Hell yeah, they are self-sealing. Here are some stamps for you.
See what I did there?
I did, yeah.
You know, for an episode where we're climbing up a mountain, I think what we're both saying is that there was no journey. It doesn't feel like we started somewhere and we ended somewhere new, right? It feels like they just yelled a lot and then got beamed back on the ship and had a good ending line. That's really what it feels like. I think specifically Odo, because Quark actually has a more well-rounded sort of arc here where it's like, I'm being underestimated. I'm choosing the high road. He has a small moment of self-doubt and physical incapability, but then still overcomes that. So, I mean, he really has the best arc in this thing. Odo we're learning that, and I kind of like it as much as it feels like there's a regression with Odo, but it's nice when you start to build a character up, right, to be what we assume is the moral authority, what we assume is sort of someone who's functioning at a higher level emotionally or intellectually, and then you come to find that maybe that's not at all true or totally true. And so there's something interesting about the grand arc of it. I think that that A story tonally and as far as how it drives the plot or the characters of our sort of meta story is almost a total failure. I really get nothing from it. Because also they're better when they're nicer to each other anyway. They've had other opportunities where they've had to assist one another, and it hasn't. If you're not going to give me why they're hating each other and they're not going to make out, then what are we doing really? The B plot, is fun. It's cool. I like seeing Nog and I like that he's doing well, and Jake and him. It's very much when
Sorry, I just swallowed the. I just swallowed. I like seeing Nog's log.
Listen, we were roommates, and there's a great period of time, and it's an interesting period of life that we have a 1-to-1 to the, but there was no stakes to it. It was sort of rote and a bit trite. But that all said, here's the thing. Sometimes I go back and play video games I've played before, not because I want to relive the plot, or not because I loved the moment-to-moment gameplay, but because I love the world and the characters, and I kind of want to just hang out with them again.
Yeah.
Yep. And I love these characters. I love Odo. I love Nog. I love Quark and Jake. I love the chemistry they've built up with each other over the seasons. And so it's still, despite all of the sort of beat-to-beat failures, kind of a cool 53 minutes. I was happy, to see Jake's socks in the replicator. I was happy to see Quark just having a fight with Odo like two married 30-somethings. So ultimately, I don't hate it, despite it's being basically failing on every level. Performances are all grounded and solid and whatnot. So ultimately, how did we rate last week?
Last week you gave a 69 and I gave an 83.
Yeah, I fall somewhere. Oh man, I can't give it much higher than that. I feel, so I'm gonna say 73.
73, yeah. It's funny. So many times when we go into these reviews, I walk out of it liking it more and being like all the more impressed. And This episode, my memory of this episode is much better than the execution of this episode. Because my memory of this episode is the episode it should have been.
Mm-hmm.
Because of
that last beat.
Because of that last beat, I remember this episode as Quark and Odo have this breakthrough through this shared trauma, and their relationship is changed because of it. But that's not actually the episode. That's just my rewriting it in my own memory. Mm-hmm. And so it's a missed opportunity that way. No, and I get it. All right, so if I'm Ira Stephen Bear or Robert Wolfe, the argument is you don't want to give away the meat of the Odo Quark. Like, you don't want to, they can't make out. They can never make out. Like the will they, won't they, right? The minute they do, you've ruined the show. So if it's like, who's the boss? The minute Tony and Angela get together, it kind of defeats the purpose of the show. Mm-hmm. Right? And it defeats the purpose of their dynamic to have them break through and change fundamentally, right? And we all know that they care for each other and that they express it through this antagonism, right? And so I get from that standpoint, well, we don't want to push on that too hard because we don't want to break the dynamic, break the relationship. But I think they pulled off so much that you said we're not climbing anywhere. Mm-hmm. We haven't actually gone anywhere. We haven't done anything. And so my memory of it is just not what the episode actually is. And I don't think I ever looked at it close enough to even notice, because it had those familiar beats you think are happening that just aren't. I'm gonna sneeze, so hold on. I'm gonna push forward. We can do this. The Jake Nog thing, it's slight. I liked it. I think it really does speak to a slice of life, mm-hmm. both in the time period and that type of relationship, and when you have that first place out there, what is your what's it like with your first dorm roommate? And I had my first roommate when I was in the dorm wasn't great, and then I moved in with my girlfriend at that point, and that was a whole thing, and then I moved in with you and other people, other actors, and so I get all of that. I really like telling the story of how radicalized Nog got mm-hmm. in military school and in college, and I think all of that was cool. I just feel like it could have been more. The arguments that they had didn't quite feel right.
Do you know what story I was expecting from that plot line? Because everybody was hyping me up that's the better storyline. And you're right, it was slight. But do you remember the time in life, right, where you had to deal with the first one of your friends got a job and they were making money? Or they were on a different street, and right? And you were like, I've chose a different life, man. I thought that's what we were going to get. Right, Jake realizing that, Nog's got this career and he's doing his thing or whatever, and I'm just kind of waiting for my thing to happen, and because there's an interesting story to tell there too. And how does a friendship thrive in that?
I like that. And what if they envied each other's position?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I think that would have been interesting. Or even if they had the same dynamic, but the things that they were antagonizing each other felt a little bit more character specific.
Yeah, and,
right?
it's a lost opportunity because they had that story be told by the parents' reaction instead of having them find it emotional.
They did a better job doing it because okay, so he's messy. Okay, yeah, that's mm-hmm. That's so stock. Mm-hmm. And we haven't seen that from Jake necessarily before. That's not a Jake thing. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with Nog, working out. When has Nog ever been a workout fiend? Mm-hmm. And I get it, military school or whatever. But
wouldn't Ben have insisted Jake do his chores and stuff when he was at home? It's
or something. Yeah, it just didn't feel specific to those characters. It felt very paint by numbers. We're gonna do this dynamic. But like you said, I love these characters so much. I love the progression for Jake and Nog, and I love that they're roommates now. I love that they're progressing and moving forward like this. So It's going to sound like I hate this episode. I don't hate this episode. I just wish it were as good as I remembered it. And so at the end, you get 77 self-sealing stem bolts from me.
I wanna, in defense of this episode, but to leave it on a positive note, I will say, I won't say that the grand arc hasn't moved at all, because I sort of feel like the last time we really visited the playing field as far as Odo Nog is concerned, it's when Odo and Quark. Remember when Quark lost his bar and the Trade Authority took everything, and we all had to come and kind of give him the shirt off our back, and kind of rebuild the bar, and he had to eat a little crow and humble himself a little bit. At that point, it was sort of like he owed us one, right? Like Quark owes us one, and we're taking care of him. And this now, it's sort of like he's regained equal footing. He was misconstrued. He let Odo say all those bad things and think all those bad things, and didn't take the opportunity to do the comeuppance, and still was the hero for the thing.
And saved his life, yeah.
So maybe we have moved forward by rebalancing the scales a little bit with them.
Yeah, okay. Don't mind that. So here's what you thought. In the world, it was a 7.4, which made it episode 100 out of 173. Up next is the episode Rapture. But that will be raptured in 2 weeks, because we are doing the First Contact watch-along, and Mike's doing 8 shows a week. He can't do all of that at the same time. So we will see you back in 2 weeks with Rapture. But next week, we're doing our live watch-along of Star Trek First Contact. Going to be super, super fun. Thank you so much for watching and listening through all of this. And we will see you back later. Till then, this has been Keith and Mike. Watch Deep Space Nine. Thank you for watching K&M Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe. Or become one of our patrons at patreon.com/KNM. And then the chicken has to ascend the duck hole.
Even further. Yeah, there's so many holes.